everyone from the task force except Jim Mack. Commissioner, what, you want to wait for Jim for a couple minutes or shall we get going?
Let's just give it about 1 more minute.
Okay.
And then we can jump right in.
Okay.
All right, just to let everybody know, I did actually start the recording.
Okay. I think that's fine, Sonny. We'll give it 1 more minute.
Shall we go?
Yes, we shall. I had 3 seconds left on my 1 minute timer. But that's good. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am calling this meeting of the Public Safety Communications Task Force to order. It's 1:02 p.m. on August 17th, 2023, and I'm Barb Neal. As a reminder, Sonny just pointed out that the meeting is being recorded via Microsoft Teams, and that recording will be posted on the web page following the meeting. So let's do a roll call of the task force members present. Good morning or good afternoon, Commissioner. You've already spoken. Good afternoon, Paul.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor Dunges.
Good afternoon. I apologize for running back.
Yeah, good. Michael Wright.
Good afternoon.
Ron Kumitz. Ron, I can see your little circle, but can't hear you. Okay, Ron just raised his hand. Ron, you're raising your hand to indicate that you're here. Okay, all right. Okay, and we do not at this point have Jim Mack. Perhaps he'll join us later. Okay, we do have a quorum. Also present, of course, is Sonny Johnson, the 911 Board's Administrative Services Coordinator, who's filling in again for Callie this week. Callie will be back next week, but you may still see correspondence from either or both of them over the next week or so. And I see we have a few members of the public present. Give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and your affiliation if that applies and you choose to share. So Philip Sisk.
Good morning, everyone. Phil Sisk here, representing Mission Critical Partners.
Good afternoon. Stephen Whitaker.
I'm unmuted now. Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
But just an open meeting alert. Raising a hand in Zoom doesn't constitute announcing yourself as far as open meeting law requires each member to identify themselves. And I think Ron didn't speak up yet.
Okay. Ron, if you're having trouble with audio, maybe you could add a note in chat that you are here. And I'm going to proceed while we wait. Welcome to the meeting, Stephen, and Kim Cheney, welcome.
Thank you, Barbara. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can.
Figure out how to use this program.
We can hear you just fine. Thanks for joining us. Okay, and I think that is it. So on to approval of the agenda. So I see Ron is trying to get back in. Sonny. Ron, it looks like you've rejoined the meeting. Are you able to speak? Well, we're still not hearing you, I'm afraid. Okay, I'm going to continue on. Ron, or I'm sorry, approval of the agenda or proposed additions. So the agenda was distributed to task force members last week and also posted on the webpage. Do task force members have any changes to the agenda? Okay. Now we have some feedback. It looks to be coming from you, Ron.
Probably because he's logged in twice.
Yeah. Okay, that's muted. All right. On to approval of the minutes from August 9th. So those minutes were distributed last week to task force members, also available on the webpage. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from August 9?
So moved.
I will make a
So moved.
motion to approve.
Excellent. So Ron, can you confirm that you are Ron Kumets in the flesh?
I can in fact confirm that.
Roger that. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so I got Mike Donges made the motion on the minutes. Commissioner, you seconded. Is that
Sure.
okay? Any discussion on the minutes? Okay. All in favor, raise your hand, please. All in favor to accept the minutes. It looks like everybody, Ron has his hand raised as well. No one opposed. So the minutes are accepted or approved. Okay, so next agenda item is status of the RFPs. We have a couple to discuss, the little RFP and the big RFP. And Commissioner, I will hand it over to you for the latest, greatest news on either or both of those.
Sure. Thanks, Barb. The little RFP, which is specific to a project manager for the task force's benefit, RFP is for all intents and purposes done. It has to go through the final window dressing at the procurement office, and it's scheduled to be released next week as early as Monday, but I will obviously let everybody know, as well as we will get a link posted on our website that will go to where the RFPs are housed once that goes live. The big RFP, which is the RFP that has multiple sections related to the subject matter expertise and all the components of the legislation, is on the agenda for review by the IT procurement advisory team at tomorrow's meeting. We are assuming that it will be approved as is, but of course we don't control what the feedback is that we get from Pat. If it is approved at Pat tomorrow, it will also be released next week. And again, we will advise the group and post a link on the website. So the only gray area on any of this is when will it actually be posted? When will the RFP be released? Because we have dates inside the RFP that all drive from when it is posted, and then we have to work around holidays, a couple of known timelines that won't work, where key players are going to not be available. So we have to drive the actual dates inside the guts of the RFP off the actual release day. So I think that what I would want to ask my task force members is, given that we've discussed the dates and the time periods, I would ask that the chairs have a little bit of flexibility on moving those timelines, either moving them or not, depending on when we can get these to hit the street. And they might not both go on the same day, right? So the little RFP might go sooner because it doesn't have to go through Pat. And if Pat comes back with changes required, we don't know how long it will take to get that finished. So we would ask for input from the task force that would allow Barb and I to change the dates inside to match what we talked about, but it would be based on the release date. Does that make sense? And then I think Barb, you wanted to talk just a bit about the big RFP. I don't necessarily, I'm not sure we're on the same exact timeline for the little RFP that we are for the big RFP.
I did have a proposed timeline for the big RFP, but I think Paul had his hand up. Paul, did you have a comment?
I did. I mean, well, to the commissioner's question, I mean, I'm okay with giving the chair some flexibility on the timeline, but I guess I will restate my question as to whether or not this really needs to go through ADS. I understand we can disagree on whether or not the dispatch system is an IT project, but we're not soliciting an IT project. We're not soliciting technology. We're soliciting personal services. So I would propose that if there's any more hesitation or roadblocks on ADS's part, this task force has the authority under the legislation to put out an RFP. I would say if ADS is going to drag their feet too long, that we just put it out without them, take their name off from it and just do it, because this is going to drag out too long.
Yeah, the little RFP, we don't need to go through Pat. And I think that the determination to put the big RFP through Pat was really designed to not gum up the works on the procurement end, because we have such a tight timeline to try and run things through, that if we forge ahead as if it's not an IT project, but then we start buying all these pieces of technology that require ADS to be involved to implement them, that then we could meet a roadblock there. So it was meant to get over the hurdle, real or perceived, at the front end, so that there isn't at the, like when we have momentum and we're actually doing things, that we don't hit that roadblock there. So it was sort of a proactive move to obviate that at the back end. But I agree with you. We don't have to be, if it's going to take 3 or 4 weeks of back and forth, the task force doesn't have to. We can choose to roll the dice about problems down the road, or having to go back as we implement the solution.
Right.
Go ahead, Mike.
Just to kind of Paul's point, if we do get to the point where ADS is taking too long right now, and we need to involve them, through the RFP process, when we award the RFP, I assume, I would make the assumption that we can get an assigned member from ADS to work with the appropriate company to spec out and scope accordingly at that point as well. So if it is a bit of a holdup, I think during the process, not necessarily at the end, but during the process, there's the opportunity to integrate with ADS at that point too.
Yeah, I don't disagree. There will be opportunity that even if we let it hit the street and they have concerns, that as the process is rolling along, it can be worked out. What I didn't want to see happen is some substantive change to the nature of the RFP to come up that doesn't match, if we get out of the gate and they're like, no, there's this statute or this regulation and you're not in compliance with this requirement from state government. That's what I didn't want to get too far ahead of.
So I could throw out some of those proposed dates that I had in mind, given I have some experience with the PAT process, which I do hope goes smoothly and would eliminate potential issues down the road, perhaps. But I think that we would, assuming things go well, or there's only minor changes perhaps that need to happen after the PAT process, that we could anticipate releasing the big RFP by the end of next week at the latest, as soon as it's ready to go, and no later than the end of next week, assuming it's ready to go. Then I would, because we have Labor Day holiday in there, I would push the date for vendors to return to us with questions to September 8, instead of just a straight 2 weeks later, like had been defined. So September 8 is what I would target. And then I would also change I would give it a little additional time for the vendor responses after we get the questions back, because we will have to respond to those questions. So I would recommend that we make responses due to the entire big RFP on Friday, the 13th of October, And then have that following week, where task force can be reviewing and hopefully make a vendor selection or target a vendor selection for October 20th, or to determine what we might want to do, if we want presentations or whatever we might want from the vendor. So responses due October 13th would be my recommendation based on that holiday and some other conflicts that I'm aware of. I see a thumbs up from,
I'm fine
The
with that
mayor?
timeline.
So I'm just, so we had originally put in the draft RFP that we were thinking the vendor would start working October 1. If responses aren't due till October 13th, when do we think that they would start working?
well, I would hope November 1. It's going to depend like it always has on contract negotiations
Right. Okay.
and how smoothly that goes.
I'm sorry, Paul, I have in the draft that the project kickoff was October 23rd, not October 1. So I think we're just pushing this by 1 week to have a project kickoff date of November 1st.
Okay. I don't have it in front of me, so I will take your word for that. I had it stuck in my head October 1, but if we're only pushing it a week, I guess can't object to that.
Yeah, we had the hope, the wishful thinking initially of an issue date of August 14th, which is not going to happen. We will have it issued before October 25th. But then working around the Labor Day holiday, we had originally said that issue date plus 2 weeks, but then you have the holiday. So I think the document that I'm looking at right now is that we would be pushing it back by a week from what we had hoped for, and exactly what we had anticipated when we first sketched this out, understanding that the veto session took 3 or 4 weeks off of our calendar.
And then there was that little flood I heard about, there was that. So we may want to also review the dates that are inside the RFP once, if we're all in agreement on kind of this path forward, just to make sure they align. I know they're all estimated dates, but we could do a quick check of that. Okay. Okay. It seems to me that there's agreement on the dates. Do we need a vote or no?
I don't think we need a
I
vote.
don't-
They just
Okay, all right. I agree.
need to make sure that all the task force members have been given an opportunity for input, and if there's anyone who objects, just let us know.
Okay, hearing no objections, shall we move on to, this is back with you, Commissioner, the updates on the congressionally directed spending application.
Sure, thank you. So as has been mentioned repeatedly, the Department of Public Safety applied for and was awarded a $9 million congressionally directed spending appropriation that was applied for and obtained, granted, when we were on a different path towards regional dispatching. And when the money came back to us, it came back through the COPS technology funding stream, which specifically disallowed subgranting, despite the fact that our application said over and over again that we intend to issue subgrants to willing regional partners, et cetera. So we found ourselves in a bit of a funnel that we weren't able to get out of, despite our efforts to get the money moved to a different funding stream or to make an exception to the no subgranting. So we found ourselves in our last meeting 1 week and a day ago, making recommendations about how the application, what we should buy with the money. It is my decision that, based on the input we heard at the last meeting, based on what I believe to be true, that pursuing the option that the Radio Technology Shop put together is the best option. We have continued to refine that, and the status this week is that we are completing a first draft of responses to all the questions that are part of that. There's like 8 or 10 questions you have to answer as part of your grant application. We have to put together timeline and budget, and we are working on finalizing a first draft of all of that. And it looks like we are on target to be able to make that submission the week of the 28th, I believe it is. I believe it is on the 28th that we have to make the submission. There's a two-step process to this. One, you have to enter into grants.gov, and the next one is in a different grant portal. So there's a two-step, 2-day process to being compliant with the next phase of things. And I'm actually pleased to report that my team has really leaned into this in the past week, and we've made a lot of headway on getting that grant application ready. So I think we're on track and we'll be on time.
Good. Any questions or comments from the task force members on the congressionally directed spending application? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to public comment. So we will give everybody who chooses to 5 minutes for public comment today. So Philip Sisk, I'll start with you if you have anything to share.
Thank you. Nothing at this time, other than I'll be looking forward to reviewing those RFPs when they are published. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Stephen Whitaker, do you have comments today?
Am I unmuted?
You are. We can hear you. Yeah.
Well, I think, for example, the discussion of the dates today, all that has been done behind closed doors heretofore. So I really think that y'all were not in compliance with open meeting law in how you manage the executive session. There was questionably anything that would compromise the state's position that was done in executive session. And I think y'all ought to make a separate recording of executive sessions from here going forward, because there would be no record and it would be really ugly, direct and cross in trying to litigate that kind of open meeting law violation without a record for a judge to review in camera. So you can't be that unfamiliar with executive session process to get in and conduction of when you should stop what you're doing and go out into open session to discuss things as simple as dates, because you've claimed until just meeting that all those dates were even secret. And so I think I've made the point. You need to vote to record your executive sessions, keep that as an allegedly exempt file, and in case this practice continues, in which case it would need to get litigated, and somebody, who understands the strict meaning of what's qualified for executive session and what's not, could review that recording. I hear no sense of urgency about the deadlines for both the reporting. It looks like it's not just contract negotiation, it's contract approval, which I've seen take a month or more. So this could be December before a contractor is starting work, and that doesn't leave enough time to get pilot projects scoped and designed and approved by this board. So I feel like this, two-person scheduling with ADS and this diversion around ADS, what is the statutory authority for this PAT team? I've never heard of them, and nor do they have any statutory authority that I'm aware of to slow down the procurement process by this task force. So I'm concerned that the complacency of allowing a couple of members to divert this thing rather than keep it on track for some production by December is going to box us in, and we're not going to have neither a report nor some approved pilot projects. And if we miss the deadline for pilot projects, sure, they can extend it, but that's going to create a whole nother mess of everybody clamoring for a piece of that 11 million and could derail the whole project. So I would like y'all to get very focused in the next section of the agenda on how you're going to catch up for the months lost in this not having taken the bull by the horns and gotten this schedule moving a month or two ago. That's enough for today.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Kim Cheney, would you care to comment?
No, other than to say a long journey starts with small steps and you're working on them.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, then back to the agenda. So the agenda item is to solicit member input on task force priorities during the RFP process. What do we need to be thinking about while the RFP is going through its its necessary actions as we move forward here? And I will open the floor to task force members.
So I've thought about this, Barb, and I want to say that at the risk of possibly duplicating efforts that may be described in the RFP, that there are things that we could do some preliminary work on, in my estimation, that would then be enhanced by the work of the subject matter experts once they are on board and familiarized with the work. And one of those would be thinking about what an effective communications plan looks like to keep interested parties beyond this core group. You know, this is the usual suspects right here on this meeting, and it's probably going to be the usual suspects unless we have a guest in to educate us about something or do something. But beyond this group, what does an effective communications plan look like to update the broader constituency on the task force's work and milestones? So that would be point number one. And the second point that I can think about, it's related to effective communications plan, is how do we do constituent outreach in advance of a contract being awarded, to let folks know that we're here and want to listen to them about their priorities. So those would be two things that I think we could spend some time working on while we wait for the RFP process to percolate along. Go ahead, Mike.
So I know there's been some pre-designated locations for potential pilots, maybe coming up with a list of that to have ready for the RFP respondents. One, and I do like the commissioner.
Mike, can I interrupt you? I'm sorry. We're having a really difficult time hearing you. It's very garbled, at least on my
Yeah,
end.
I'm sorry. Is this any better or no?
That is better. Yeah.
Okay, great. Apparently, I was talking to the wrong side of my microphone. I apologize.
Okay.
Communications issues, as the commissioner was saying. So, there's, I know there's been discussion about pre-designated pilots and even some stuff that happened prior to this board being put together, but maybe having a list of some potential pilot locations for the RFP respondents, right? Stuff, information that we can provide, gathering and building an informational collection that we can provide to those respondents and who we award their RFP to accelerate their process. Data that we know that they don't necessarily have to go and research on their own, that we can provide to them for the things that we're asking. So whether it's the communications plan, the pilot locations, or even, where we know there are already dead spots in communications infrastructure, like having that information that we already have so they don't have to go dig it up, like we could probably help find paths to those pieces of information. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. Other ideas, thoughts on this? Next steps would be another question that's circulating in my head.
Barb, if I'll go.
Yep.
Nobody else
Sure.
has got their hand up. Well, to follow up on what the mayor just said regarding pilot projects, one of the things that sort of got us headed down the road to where we are is the fact that DPS can no longer afford, and I don't mean financially afford, but can't afford to keep dispatching for free for all these municipalities. So I've been saying for a year now that a pilot project should be focused on whatever part of the state is going to bring the most immediate relief to the DPS dispatch centers. And unless things have changed in the past 6 months, I think that's Rutland County. And Rutland County needs to fail over somewhere, and Addison County would seem to make sense to be the place. So I guess that would be my vote for where to focus the first pilot project when we get to that point. And then sort of in the same vein as the commissioner, a lot of this may end up being redundant work because we're looking to hire both a project manager and subject matter experts to help us with this. But I think we as a task force need to at least give some thought and discussion to what is governance going to look like for a regional dispatch center, and by that I mean, who's going to own it, who's going to run it, who would we allow to own it and run it. For example, under the path that DPS was headed down last year, Orange County was slated to be given money to be a dispatch center, and now a year later, there really is practically no Orange County Sheriff's Department. So what would we do if they had been granted money to stand up a dispatch center, a new sheriff gets elected and decides he or she doesn't want to run one? How are we going to deal with that? Who's going to own the equipment? Who's going to own the entity? Or what if a community signs on with a regional dispatch center, but then decides they want to switch to a different one? Those are the kind of things that we need to at least give some thought to, even though I know the subject matter experts are going to guide us on that. But the more thought and discussion we can give to it ahead of time, the more prepared we'll be when we get there. So governance is one. I think similarly, technology standards. We don't want everybody just going through a catalog and picking their own. I think I want to buy these radios. I think I want to buy those radios. We want to come up with some kind of standard so that when we're ready to set up regional dispatch centers, everybody's on the same page. And again, the sooner we can have those thoughts and discussions, the better off we'll be, rather than waiting for the subject matter expert to tell us. And then I guess the last thing is we talked a lot in previous meetings about CAD system. I've heard rumor that DPS is putting out some kind of I won't call it an RFP, but doing some kind of a search for maybe a new CAD RMS system. And if maybe at a future meeting, if we could get an update on that, if that's even true. Maybe I heard something that was untrue. But
if we are, it's news to me.
Okay. Well, maybe that's all the discussion we need to have then.
Sorry, Paul, I don't know if you're finished or not. I see Mike Dunn just said your hand is up. So, okay. Did you want to follow up with Paul's comments? Okay.
I did. I think Paul hit some good points, and I think actually we can start preparing those lists, but when we get our project manager for our side, they'll be able to help us really define that, Paul. So I think that's working together in that.
I don't think I caught all of it, Mike. Sorry.
I apologize. I was just saying that I think Paul's points are really good ones, and I think having our project manager on board will help us get through that process as well. So.
Got it. Yes, that makes sense. I think I'll add a comment here on Paul's comment about developing technology standards. I'm a firm believer in technical and operational standards. It's what the whole 911 system is built on. I would be what I think will be of great benefit when we have a vendor on is those experts know which standards we need to be thinking about and implementing or considering for implementation. I wouldn't have a comfortable level of knowledge on that at this point. So, but others on the task force probably do. And so we can at least begin that list, if you will, of things that we want to consider. Right now, first, Kim Cheney, I do see your hand. I'm going to get comments from task force members first, and then I'll confer with the co-chair about whether or not we want to accept public input on this topic. So you can be thinking about that, Commissioner. Ron Kumitz, go ahead.
So I am certainly on board with the idea of having operational standards, but I caution that getting into the same boat as other states have, where we tell individual stakeholders that they need to buy a certain brand of equipment, puts us in a hole where I mean, there are fire and EMS agencies in this state whose communications budget can't actually afford to repair one of the more sophisticated radios out there. So we need to be conscious of that when we develop our standards, because even if we have grant funding to implement this, we don't want to bankrupt ourselves going forward by developing a system that is too costly for our individual agencies to afford.
Good point. Any other task force member input at this point?
I just want to ask my fellow task force members to give some thought to this. We don't want to get going on a section of the RFP that we would be awarding. We don't want it, like, I'm just going to use what you just said, Ron, the technical standards piece. We don't want to get going in a direction that somehow leads the successful bidder to think that's the avenue we're pursuing. We want to remain open to all possibilities and encouraging multiple options be brought to us. So I just would be careful that if we're going to start working on something as specific as governance or technology standards, that we do it in a way that is super Switzerland, right? Just info, not trying to show that we are favoring one direction or another, because I don't want a successful vendor to come to us and be like, oh, I know where they're headed. We're going to make them really happy by doing X. So that's all. I just want to kind of try and throw out again that we don't want to duplicate the effort of the RFP, but we do want to jumpstart what we can. And I liked what we were talking about with the possible pilot project locations, and that would include things like the contacts, like who are the people who could be involved in decision making, get those pre-identified, gauge level of interest, opportunities, and then be able to turn over a little bit of this is where we think these opportunities live for pilot projects to the vendor who's going to hit the ground cold. So I just want to make sure we're not foreshadowing preferences by doing too much work in one direction or another. And I'm totally open, since we have a minute here, that if Mr. Cheney wants to weigh in, I'd be happy to hear his thought.
I have one more comment as a task force member just before we do that, and that would be whether or not, or we should be thinking about what other entities the task force needs information from. Are there is there anything out there that we need to know more about? Like the state has done some work on dead spots around the state, cellular dead spots specifically. Other state partners we might want to hear from are like the Vermont Community Broadband Board, and find out what they're up to and how it might impact what we're up to. So I would encourage task force members to think about what else they might want to know to be informed about the current landscape and the work that's being done around, well, not just at the state level either, the local and county perhaps. So that's not really a well-formed thought at this moment, but I'll be thinking too about who we might want to get input from, so we can discuss it at a next meeting. And now I'll be quiet and go over to Kim Cheney.
Thank you.
Oops, did we lose him? I think we did. Okay, well, he's getting reconnected. Stephen, would you like to comment at this point?
I would. I just see that I'm thinking about this timeline, and I don't believe that if your subject matter experts contracts don't get executed until late October, early November, you need to have provisionally adopted some kind of technical standards to allow pilot projects to begin to shape their ideas, as well as governance, because the delay, the subject matter experts, I don't think are going to be ready to give recommendations until year end, if not next year. And so the pilot projects are going to have to be governed, both governed and technical standards that are set up provisionally based on, APCO or NTPSC, whatever it's called. There are documented standards for resiliency and failover and redundancy and storm hardening, et cetera. So, and Barb, to your comment, I think it's not inconsistent with my recommendation. I don't think it would be practical to hear from all the different initiatives and try to bring this task force up to speed on the activities and interrelationships between the statewide fiber strategy being implemented by the broadband board and the interoperability plan that Corey Chase is supposed to finish for Terry. I think that I have asked repeatedly that this task force recommend the governor reissue the ECAC executive order and get all these related initiatives into one forum, an advisory only forum, not an executive forum, where they all put all their cards on the table and look for synergies and come up to speed on what y'all are doing. Having this task force present to that advisory council what it's up to, and then have them work several meetings separately, coming back with ideas. There was a good piece in the paper recently by Christine Hallquist talking about the need for fiber resiliency, storm hardening, but they're operating completely in secret with all their plans claimed exempt. So how are we going to basically verify that we're building infrastructure that is storm hardened? So that advisory council would be, I've got a list in my head of all the people that would need to be on it, but I don't see this task force getting its head around all those different initiatives. If you weren't tired of hearing from me by now, you certainly would be then.
Okay, thank you for your input.
Mr. Cheney's back. Let's give him a crack at it
Yes.
and then move on.
Yes, sorry, I fumbled with this program. I'm not familiar with it. Look, I've heard all the technical stuff, but your group talked very wisely about getting independent legal advice. What's going to crater any future is fighting over the governance. And I want to support Paul White. The governance issue, you're going to need some independent legal advice. And by that, I mean probably a law firm who feels they can navigate you through municipal law and governance plans. And kind of one of the sticking points that I ran into when I was trying to work on this, both the Department of Public Safety and Homeland Services have their own regulations for grants. And as I read what's on the table at the moment, I mean, what's enacted governance is that DPS has to follow essentially the Homeland Security grant proposals that talk about governance. And one of the sleepers that I couldn't figure out is, do those rules require competitive bidding? Because what happened locally when we thought we had some money is they opted for provider financing, which is to say Motorola would buy it all and then you would kind of lease it from them and pay them back over time. And that obviously eliminates competitive bidding. And I think some legal work has to be done on the congruity between Homeland Security regs and state regs. And I think this task force can think about the various models of governance, and they all have their own things to fight over. But the bottom line is getting disparate people with different interests to work together is a complex job. And it takes a legal format to get it done. And to my mind, that's equally important with all the technology. And the cost issue, cost is always an issue. The question is how it's going to be divided and what services are going to be provided. But you need a format for how to pour that money in and see that it's used wisely. So I would urge, by the way, Commissioner Morrison, I've emailed your Homeland Security unit and asked a question about competitive bidding. Nobody wants to answer that question. I can't get an answer to it. So it either doesn't exist or it's too opaque and nobody wants to opine on it. But I think it's critical because structure, or you're going to get provider financing. So we got to look at how we're going with this. And I mean, 11 million, Paul may be right. It may be enough to get Rutland off the ground, but it didn't get anybody else off the ground. Just heavy thoughts down the road for everybody. Thank you for listening.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Okay. Any other public comment on the issue of what we need to be thinking about, what the task force needs to be thinking about? Okay. Hearing none, I think we will go to the last agenda item, which is new business. Is there any new business other than setting the next meeting date? Okay. Commissioner, thoughts on the cadence for next meeting at this point?
If the RFPs go out next week, I would propose that we go 2 weeks out for our next meeting. And that in that interval, we have time to think about what we're going to work on during the rollout. I think that there's going to be times in the cadence of this project where we do have to meet weekly because of the, need to keep things moving. I don't believe that right this second we're in one of those must meet every week, but I'm open to the feedback of the rest of the group.
I would agree with Jen on that. I'm not suggesting you need to schedule around me. For quorum purposes, I just want to let you know that I will likely not be available on the week of the 30th.
Let me pull up a calendar here.
That would be 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. Is anyone
long as
else
there's a
not
long-
going to be here the week of the 28th of August? Okay, then I think we should be okay.
should be okay.
quorum-wise. Okay. So what do people think about the 30th, going back to Wednesday, the 30th at 11:15? Would that be agreeable to people?
That would be fine with me.
All
Thank you,
right, I
Ron.
got
Good with me as
Ron,
well.
Mike D. I'm seeing Mike
Michael's fine.
W nodding.
Yep.
It's good for you, Barb?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay, 11:15 on Wednesday, August 30th. I'm gonna just block that out, next task force meeting. And we'll get that meeting notification out in a timely manner.
Yes.
That's all I
Okay.
have for new business.
All right. Then I believe we can move on to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, will make a motion to adjourn.
Thank
So
you.
moved.
Second.
I didn't hear who seconded. Saudi, are you all set?
Paul
Paul,
seconded.
okay. All right.
Just
And we'll
pick
vote
one.
to adjourn. Raise your hand if you approve.
I approve.
Aye.
Excellent. All right, aye. Excellent. All right, everybody, we'll see you on the 30th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.